Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Never before in the history of sports podcasts have two men brought you opinion and analysis like these two. They speak for a city that's desperate for wins and titles, not whining and travesty. You might not agree with what they have to say, but you'll defend their right to say it. Sports fans across the world, from Chicago, Illinois, this is the Mac and Reed Show.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Mac and Reed Show right here on the Barroom Network. You can follow us on social media. Follow me at 311 Mac. Follow Ross at Ross Reed, of course, and follow Barroom Network at Barroom Network for all the great programming we have, all the Bears coverage going on throughout the NFL season. We're live on YouTube streaming right now, but in case you've missed any of the previous episodes, they're up on YouTube as well. Audio-only versions on Spotify, iTunes. Remember, on all these outlets, like, subscribe, tell a friend or two. A lot to get to as we've been on sort of mini hiatus with our lives, lifing, as we say. A lot to get to with the Bears. Of course, dropping a 4-3 after their loss to Washington. Look ahead to Arizona and just talk about the season thus far, the good, the bad, and you guessed it, the ugly. And we'll talk about the rest of the division as well. We'll whip around the NFL, talk about all of these teams at length at about the halfway point in the season here of 2024-2025. We'll talk about the World Series, Tyler, the Creator, dropping a new project, Halloween tomorrow night, if you're watching with us live, and surprises along the way, as usual. And, of course, I'm joined by my co-host, the Lord of the South Loop, the hookup for hair restoration. He's a sexy podcast host for Halloween, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ross Reed.
Good to be back after a few weeks off. Good to see you. Yeah. Thanks for the beautiful intro.
Good to see you. What's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, life has been lifing. Have all you homeowners out there, get yourself good homeowner insurance.
And the Lord of the 2-in-1 washer dryer, that thing looks sleek.
That thing is sleek. It talks to you. I can
oh, Jesus.
I can now do stuff from my phone with it. It's technology, man.
Holy shit.
It's also the simple things. As I turn 43 and you get mesmerized now by a washer dryer combo. Like how much the times have changed as we get old.
I was mesmerized by the picture. I know we had talked about, like you said, you got to get yourself some good homeowner insurance in case shit happens. That's why you have it. And now you went from 2 to just the all-in-one thing, which looks pretty wild. That it talks to you. Yep. That sounds like a Halloween episode in itself. It's gonna haunt you guys come tomorrow.
Exactly.
All the Halloween colors and shit. That's fun. But we begin as usual, and remember to chime in the comments. Thanks to all the bar flies, of course, chiming in throughout the show. Any questions or issues we don't get to, remember to comment throughout the chat. But yes, let's talk about the Bears at length. I mean, what else could you say? The Bears were in a good position to go 5-2, as we well know from this past Sunday. Mostly bad for this team, just on the road. After the bye week, you think they'd look a little fresher and rested, but Caleb Williams did not look sharp, only completing 10 passes for 131 yards. It was not great for the rookie quarterback. 131 yards, no scores, and really just no big plays. I mean, the most, it was like 15 yards, something like that. I don't have the stats in front of me. The stat I do have in front of me, DeAndre Swift, thankfully turned it on for the Bears offense and put the team on his back for that 56-yard running touchdown, which was incredible, on like a sweep. But other than that, the Bears offense really had a tough day against Washington and their home turf. The Bears defense did their best against a hot young quarterback and Jaden Daniels. You knew that was going to be a big headline going in, the number 1 and number 2 overall picks, the hot young quarterbacks. And you take away the Hail Mary from Daniels, you held him to no touchdowns. He would have been under 300 yards. It's a pretty good day. But that Hail Mary obviously is getting all the headlines. It was the headline of the day Sunday. Just something that you have nightmares about in the history, especially with Bears fans. It's up there with the bad losses that we've seen in the past, as far as, looking just as recent as last year to the Lions in a close game. The Browns in that traveling game was really rough. It's basically, I don't have the stat in front of me, but in games where the Bears shouldn't lose their 90% win percentage to finish it out going into like the fourth quarter, they have a chance to hold out and win, they go ahead and lose it. And we'll talk about the moments like Tyreek Stevenson and the taunting and the way he handled it, allowing the Terry McLaurin completion to put them at midfield on that drive with the Hail Mary, the handoff to Doug Kramer, which was just the stupidest fucking call on offense you could possibly make, I think, at that time. But the offense, as far as, I don't want to dwell on this too much looking ahead to the Cardinals, but the offense, I suppose you could take being bad after the bye. We're going to get an inconsistent quarterback in Caleb Williams. But if you take away that 50-plus yard run by Swift, it's just a bad day from the offense, and that reflects on Shane Waldron as well. It really comes back to the big takeaway from this, past loss and most of his career is just Matt Eberflus in these close games, and talks about accountability repeatedly. It's just nauseating the way he's doing this. The defense can only do so much, but it just seems pretty unanimous from, the radio hosts and critics and folks around the NFL, coaches alike, that Matt Eberflus ain't it, and he might be holding Caleb Williams back. You're looking along in the future here, but just past the season, it doesn't look like he would be sticking around. So you could start there. You could start anywhere with the loss, Ross, but let me get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a poor effort coming off of a bye week for a team that played well, obviously, in Jacksonville. So the arrow was pointing up. I thought it was just a poor job all the way around on the coaching staff. You look at the defensive side of the ball, they were able to hold them to a lot of field goals, but they still gave up well over 400 yards of offense to the Commanders. Against a quarterback that was compromised, he had a rib injury. Granted, he gets a big chunk of yards on the Hail Mary play at the end of the game, but he still finished with over 300 yards. And they were able to even run the ball pretty well as well. But to me, the most disappointing thing is the game plan that Shane Waldron had coming out. This is a Washington defense that was bottom third in the league in pass defense. And I thought that he was trying to do too many complex concepts with the passing game, with the routes that he was running with the receivers. And this was actually the game to focus more on the fundamentals, especially with the week off, and just play the hits and just keep it simple for Caleb Williams and the rest of this offense. And to me, things didn't start kicking up until the third quarter, until obviously the DeAndre Swift run for the touchdown. But, Caleb started playing a little bit of kind of schoolyard, backyard football, and just kind of scrambling around a little bit and making plays. And he had them in position in that halfway through the fourth quarter to take the lead. The handoff to Doug Kramer was indefensible. Why you're handing it off to a backup, offensive lineman at that spot on the road when you have, more than capable running backs on your roster, those kind of things just can't happen. And that's why you say this is just a coaching malpractice all across the board. And that's why they took the heat all week. Matt Eberflus was bad. He didn't call timeouts at the end of the game like he should have to get his defense in position to defend the sidelines, to defend the end zone. They ran a fade play before the go-ahead touchdown to instead of running the football, which would have forced also the Commanders to waste one of their timeouts that they had left. These are the kind of things that can't happen where you're a coaching staff. And these are the kind of things you look at when you say, now you look at this game, and you look at the game that they lost as well against the Colts. And these are, to me, on the coaching staff a lot. So, it's the difference between now you're 4-3 and you have two, in my opinion, must-win games coming up. We'll talk about the Cardinals in a minute. And then you have the Patriots outside of that, because you're going to go into some really tough division football games. But, I think a competent head coaching staff, let's say you're Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan or Mike Tomlin, somebody of that, this football team would be they'd have 6 wins right now. They'd be a 6-1 football team, or so that's the most disappointing part to me. Yes, Caleb missed throws. I thought the route concepts were awful. If you can kind of look at them on the All-22 that's been out this week. But I was really impressed with how poised he was and kind of turned it on the back half of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter. And at the end of the day, the Bears should have won that game. They should have won that game. It was one of the most gut-wrenching losses that we've seen in a long time. Not quite, Cody Parkey level or Chris Conte level against Aaron Rodgers, but it's up there. And I think as a fan base right now, everybody was just dejected this week because we're just sick and tired of seeing this. When are we going to be on the other side of these kind of losses and not see this anymore? So we'll see what happens this Sunday. They have to. They are also a very beaten up football team right now with these injuries, and but they have to go out there. There's no excuses. Cardinals are a decent team, but they're one of the worst pass rush teams in the NFL right now. To me, in my opinion, this has to be an offensive-led situation on Sunday. You got to go out there and score points. Score points. Show us what you got. You got DJ Moore. You got Keenan Allen, Roman Dunze, Cole Kmet. There are weapons on this team. It's time to start producing with this offense.
You talked about these coaching decisions being inexcusable. I'd even go a step further and call it Bush League, just the way that this repeatedly happens. And, you've given Matt Eberflus benefit of the doubt. Obviously, it's a new quarterback. You got a new offensive coordinator. But just alone in that moment to allow the Terry McLaurin play to get an extra 13 yards to get it to midfield on that possession alone, you take the rest of the game out of it just for now. And then on the Hail Mary, the defense that was called, I know that Tyreek Stevenson was John at the crowd and eventually tipped it to Noah Brown, who caught that touchdown. But just to have 3 men rushing and TJ Edwards, there's a spy. It was just very bizarre. I mean, again, you talked about it's not in the same vein as like Chris Conte or Cody Parkey. Thankfully, this wasn't a game that really meant a whole lot. Obviously, you'd rather be 5-2 than 4-3. But it speaks volumes with Matt Eberflus. And Matt Eberflus, the whole narrative is completely changed. If you go and just hold this out for a win on the road after the bye week and you get that momentum going into Arizona, when you're gearing up for the second half, that's a dog, man. When you're getting Green Bay and Detroit and Vikings playing them all twice, not to mention the Seahawks and some other great teams along the way, especially the 49ers in there as well. It only gets harder. These are games that you can't lose if you want to be in a wild card position for the Bears and for this team. But again, I don't want to put it. I do want to put a lot of it on Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron, but also, it's just so tough to watch Caleb Williams struggle like he did. And I think that you did see some rust. I think you did see that the play calling just wasn't beneficial for him in that game. It's crazy to see a year removed from when DJ Moore went off for 200 plus yards and had one of the best games of his career, just being unstoppable, to being held to 1 or 2 catches, something like that. The chemistry doesn't seem to be there. Just the utilization with all this talent doesn't seem to be there. The Doug Kramer play again in Bush League, when you're handed off to an offensive lineman, when you should have been feeding DeAndre Swift or Roshan Johnson, who are a great 1-2 punch, a great combo, when there's injuries decimating skill position players in the league right now. It's just wild to see. And the Bears, again, they're not at the top of the league in offense and defense, but when in games like this, they're actually at the bottom of the league in passing yards, which is just a recurring theme. But the defense points against their top 5. 17 points a game at this point. And that showed against Washington. You could have outdueled Jaden Daniels. And on the other side, I mean, Washington, you shouldn't be hanging your hat on this. This was a fluke. I get you're 6-2 and you celebrate a win however you get it. But it's one of those situations where the Bears lost the game rather than you won it. But again, going into Arizona, when you're on the road again, it's like you said, Ross, they got to put up points. They got to figure out how to get Caleb Williams back to, the quarterback that we saw heading into the bye week rather than this week after the bye week against Washington.
100%. And, I completely agree with you. The defense, they played well enough to win, obviously, outside of the last 2 plays of the football game. But, everybody's got to get back in the lab and see how they can get this whole team cohesively humming again, and then also do it in a consistent basis. This is not a bad football team. This is a very talented football team, in my opinion. They have enough talent to get to, 10 wins this season. But when you let go of some of those cheapies like you do, like in the NFL, this is a dogfight every year, and they are not of the upper echelon teams. They're not of the top teams in the league, your Chiefs of the world, even like a team like the Detroit Lions who are in your division are the cream of the crop. But they're still in that. Yeah, absolutely. But they're shout out to Humber. But they're still in the mix, and I think that what the NFL will prove to you any week is anybody can get beat, even the Detroit Lions, right? Anybody can get beat on every given week. We saw what Cleveland did last week to the Ravens. But the last week in general was just a crazy point in the league. You have to be able to steal the cheapies whenever you can in this league, because at the end of the day, the goal is to try and get to 10 wins. However possible you can do it. They stole one for week 1 against the Titans. And now you put yourself, like I said at the beginning, in a must-win situation, in my opinion, 2 weeks in a row, because the schedule becomes a gauntlet going through November into December. You really wanted to have that Washington game because it was right there and stack some more wins, but that's okay. If you were to say a couple of weeks from now, the Bears are 6-3, we'll still take that. So the building is not on fire, even though it might feel like it has been at Hallis Hall this week. And you've got, talks of Ben Johnson, wanting to come to the Bears this past off season. It's always coincidental how those things always come out after a loss where everybody's blaming the coach. Those things come out because we're not talking about Ben Johnson today or yesterday. If the Bears win that football game, I can promise you we're not. So, but again, get the offense running. I want to see them get the passing game going. I want to see them get the quarterback going. I believe Caleb Williams has all the talent in the world, and he's the guy that is going to be both the present and the future. But this coaching staff has to give him a little bit of help. And so this is our offensive line, and this is offensive line that is going to be it's been much maligned all year. They have a lot of injuries. We don't even know what the 5 guys are going to look like this Sunday. It's looking like we might not have Tevin Jenkins. We are not going to have Braxton Jones at left tackle. We know that already. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks. So does Nate Davis come in there? Larry Borum is probably going to get activated closer to the end of the week on the 53-man roster, and he'll probably be your starting left tackle this Sunday. So, again, it's not going to get any easy, but you can't complain. This is the NFL. Everybody goes through injuries. Everybody goes through these situations. You got to figure it out. You got to find a way. I still like to see this team put up close to 30 points on Sunday against this putrid Cardinals defense.
Yeah, you certainly would. You touched on the injuries, Ross, and just when you think that the offensive line is playing a bit better, and certainly on the ground game, they've done a good job. I think that the pass protection has been pretty decent. They've dealt with, now they're sending Bill Murray to IR. Ryan Bates has been on IR, as we've talked about repeatedly. You talked about Larry Borum coming back. The guys who have been healthy, as in Tevin Jenkins, Darnell Wright, have been doing their jobs well. Nate Davis, that's been floated around this week as far as what you do with him. Like a trade has been floated, but nobody wants Nate Davis. You can't get rid of him. So you're just,
now you might have to play him. Now you might have to play him because you don't have any healthy guards left.
And he doesn't, it's such a shitty situation going back to signing this guy when you figure he would have filled in so nicely on the interior as a focal point of that offensive line. He just has not been that guy at all. And now to have to play him when he looks like he does not want to play football is, taking a note from Anthony Richardson's playbook that we'll talk about in a minute. It's tough when the players who are playing well, i.e. Jalen Johnson, Montez Sweat, part of that offensive line, guys who are the vets too. They're talking about like Jalen Johnson saying that the Bears needed to, quote, have a better operation throughout the week, a better way of detailing things. We've seen this before. Half this roster is not a fan of what Matt Eberflus is doing. I mean, you could look at the way that Hard Knocks punched him up and the way they punched up this team. Everything looks hunky-dory on the outside and the way that the media covers it. But there's plenty of guys in that locker room who've got to be thinking, this fucking guy again. He's done it again, and he's lost us a game. And you can't blame – it's the 3 phases. It's the offense, the defense, the special teams as much as it is coaching. And you win as a team, you lose as a team. But, man, so many opportunities that you get, and you figure when you were in a position now going into the season where expectations were so high to potentially compete in the division with the Detroits and the Green Bays and upstart Vikings of the world, to now be 4-3. And again, the building's not completely on fire, but this is very telling where you see another loss like this for Matt Eberflus, where you think they got to make the playoffs at this point. If they come up short, I got to think he's gone and they look elsewhere. I know you talked about that news coming out again of Ben Johnson being floated as a head coach candidate. They got to look all around the league. And then Shane Waldron, I'm not sure, with 1 year under his belt, that's not maybe enough tape to judge him properly and build up enough of a rapport with Caleb Williams. But what do you think of Matt Eberflus' future, Ross?
Yeah, I think it's up for grabs right now. I think right now he is on the precipice of potentially losing the locker room. The quotes this week were damning. The losses this year are bad. He's had so many just in-game issues with poor challenges, poor uses of timeouts, not calling the timeouts when he's supposed to. And it all came to a head this past Sunday. That was just an indictment on his entire staff. I mean, you look at that fourth quarter alone, again, you're in a position to steal a football game. Your offense is finally playing well. Your defense is getting stops. Your quarterback makes a hell of a throw on the sideline, getting blasted to put them in position to win the football game. You should be running the football at that point and working some clock and getting a touchdown, and then forcing the Commanders to go 65, 70 plus yards in about 10 seconds to win. Instead, you leave them time on the clock. You don't protect the sidelines. You don't call a timeout before the Hail Mary to get your team in position. We talked about all this. You have a QB spy in TJ Edwards on a running back that stayed in to block, where just last week we saw the contrary, where we saw a blitz from the Lions to blitz the Vikings on a Hail Mary to force the quarterback to get rid of the football sooner than he had to, which was ending in a loss. And then all this, of course, we all seen the viral video of what Tyreek Stevenson did. And yes, I put a lot of blame on the player in that situation. But as a head coach, you need to see that your cornerback is on the other side of the field with his back turned and not ready for a play. And you see the way they line up. You just need to call a timeout. You don't get to take them with you into the next week to Arizona. Call a timeout. It's the last play of the game. Get your guys some rest too. Allow them to catch their breath. And then let's go out there and finish this game. So indictment on the coaching staff. Now he is, I think, probably the most under the microscope right now around the league, because people around the league know that the quarterback is good. The offense should be better. The defense is good, but you don't get brownie points for being a good defensive coordinator as a head coach and being a bad head coach overall. So I think, if he's not able to definitely win these next two, and win some of these division games coming up that are tough and get this team to 10 wins, I think he's going to be looking for a new job next year. And he'll be a great defensive coordinator somewhere. But listen, Ben Johnson as a head coach with Robert Saleh, something like that, as a defensive coordinator, sounds pretty appealing for Bears fans right now.
Sure does. And, looking ahead to Arizona's no slouch. I know that they're in just a dogfight in their division, as our San Francisco and Seattle and the Rams, they're all kind of up in the air for that NFC West at this point. They're coming off a couple wins where, they play a pretty tough Dolphins team and a Chargers team and win by a couple points here and there. But they have that momentum. They're at home. Playing the Bears at this point. We know that the story is Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison, that young upstart wide receiver, and what the Bears should do defensively is certainly lock him down. That rushing offense is very good at the top of the league with James Conner and company. They got a solid offensive line. But you talked about the Bears offense needs to look like they did in London, where they went off against the Jaguars. Obviously, that's a different team completely, but you need to see that sort of point scoring to figure they're going to come out of Arizona with a win at that point. And the defense, getting after Kyler Murray would certainly be a nice change from the way that they defended Jaden Daniels pretty well, but couldn't really get a large amount of pressure. I want to see what I saw in previous games where you're bringing more unique blitz packages, where you're bringing corners or you're bringing 6 guys at a time, you're bringing linebackers, and you're really mixing it up and disguising coverages. And then one of those sort of, if you're Tyreek Stevenson, you want to see one of the best games of his career at this point. That got to motivate you, man. in the secondary, and the same with all these players who gave up that Hail Mary say, hey, we're a bunch of a lot of a hell of good players here that should be in a better position, and we should get out of Arizona with a win. And it's definitely needed, as we talked about repeatedly, when you look at all the NFC North opponents coming up. You got to put points on the board. What else comes to mind to get a win in Arizona for you, Ross?
That's it. To me, you just have to put points on the board. I know you can't rely on the defense is good, but I don't want to rely on them week in and week out. At some point, you're going to have to see a little bit of an offense explosion. The Arizona Cardinals defense this year, they're not very good. Okay, they're giving up 20. They're 26th in the league right now in passing yards giving up. They're also 26th in the league right now in rushing yards giving up. They're all across the board, not very good. They're one of the worst teams in the last 20 years in generating a pass rush on a roster. So, what should help the Bears offense this week, especially with their offensive line issues, this Cardinals defense does not get after the quarterback at all. Okay. They are not a team that gets sacks. In fact, on the season, they only have 1.5 sacks on the season. Okay. So they're not going to be able to put a ton of pressure on the quarterback, which should help Caleb Williams. You should think. Also, you look at their defense. 6 out of the 8 games this year, their expected points on defense, they've put up minus, which means that they are absolutely terrible. The last game against the Dolphins, that was more of an indictment on the Dolphins blowing that game themselves defensively than the Cardinals defense doing anything. The expected points on defense for the Cardinals was minus 17.63. So that they're just not a very good team on defense. And their offense is actually pretty pedestrian as well. Kyler Murray, he's a very hit or miss quarterback. He has been throughout his entire career. He's going to have some up and down games. He did have a solid game last week. But I do feel confident in guys like Jalen Johnson being able to lock down rookie wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. You hit it on the head. Tyreek Stevenson has got to play a better football game, and I think he will. I know a lot of people are saying he should be benched this week. He should, not. He should be forced to not play. I don't buy into that. He made a mistake. He's a young man. He made a mistake, but he's also a professional football player. Benching him is not going to do much. I promise you, throughout this entire week, he heard it from the people that needed to hear it. He heard it from the coaching staff. He heard it from the players. He heard it from the general manager. He heard it probably from the team president. Let him go out there and play football again and redeem himself. That, benching guys for stuff like that, that's high school shit. These guys make millions of dollars. You need to put your best 11 guys on the football field when you go out there. He's still one of their best 11 players on defense, even though he made a mistake. So I think that this should be a get-right game for this Bears offense. I think that this should be a game where you see Caleb Williams throw for 300 yards again, have a couple TDs to the end zone. I could expect a little bit of a shootout here because I think the Cardinals can also put some points up, especially if they fall behind pretty early. Kyler Murray has shown you this season and in the past that when he's down by 10, 14 points, he'll come back and get some points in bunches. So I expect the Bears to win in this game, but I expect to be some points on both sides.
Yeah, I would like to see some points. It's been a lot of slogs in the first 7 games of the season. And again, only getting tougher when, you get into the NFC North opponents and the rest of the second half schedule that is so tough after, these are the games you should be winning in the Cardinals and the Patriots before, facing back-to-back foes in the NFC North. And, Arizona is not a world-beaten team by any means. The way the Bears have played into this, second half of the season, you think that they should get more of an edge than what Vegas is giving them, and the way that it's just a coin flip at this point. But it all rides on certainly Caleb Williams and his performance. He can't be throwing 131 yards and expecting to win that game, and expecting the defense and special teams to do all the scoring for him. They got to put up points. DeAndre Swift has been nice, and I'm great that Ross has to eat his words, and I do as well, that these Eagle running backs are no good. But DeAndre Swift had a slow start, but he's been great. Keep leaning on him. You don't have to get cute. Keep running the football with Swift to set up Caleb Williams and this talented group of receivers and tight ends that he has, and go and make sure that the headline now is that the Bears improved to 5-3 going into week 9. So,
yep. And I was going to say, underrated aspect of this game, Arizona road game, but big road game for Bears fans. So expect a lot of Bears fans to be in attendance down in the Glendale area. A lot of people in Arizona are Chicago migrants. They already live down there. And then also anytime you can get to Arizona after October, a lot of Bears fans are going to take advantage of that too. So I fully expect for that stadium on Sunday to be about at least 40% capacity with Bears fans, which is going to help as well. Bears fans always travel well to any city, but especially down to Arizona. They're going to be deep in there, and that's going to help.
Should have went there instead of Houston, but I digress.
Right.
But I certainly digress. Let's whip around the rest of the NFL here. Again, we talked about halfway through the season. I just want to briefly go over the division standings in each team. So we'll start with the East at this point. And the Bills, we're 6-2 as we're really sort of figuring out the pretenders and contenders at this point in the season, and certainly who's going to be winning the division, i.e. the Bills and the AFC East. And the Bills, the headline is certainly Josh Allen being that MVP front runner alongside Lamar Jackson and Mahomes, even though this is a down year for Mahomes. Those guys, one of those guys got to win it, in my opinion. On the ground, James Cook has been a stud. He got great coaching, great defense. The division is theirs, certainly at this point in the season. They haven't played great competition yet, say for the Ravens when they got blown out. The game against the Chiefs on November 17th should be very telling for their Super Bowl chances. What's, again, surprising and just disappointing is certainly, we saw the good news is Tua came back for the Dolphins and is coming back and going to be playing football, and that neurologists and all these doctors that he talked to said that he could continue to play football at this point in his career and play at this high level. Certainly one more concussion or head injury or any sort of injury would make you question that. But you see how vital he is to that Miami offense, and that team winning as a whole. You wouldn't think that they'd be 2-5 at this point. Patriots, you kind of expected a slump with Drake May finally getting in there to start. They've just, not been the same team since the departure of Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, still sort of in a perpetual rebuild. And then the Jets, I mean, if you're a Bears fan, thank God you're not a fucking Jets fan. It's just insane to think that now this is, if you're the Jets and invested so much in Aaron Rodgers and didn't get him last year, this is what you get this year. This is not it. And you go ahead and you traded for Devontae Adams and think, oh, this might propel us to at least compete in the division. But I mean, at 2-6 at this point, they just don't look good with all that offensive firepower. They've fired Robert Saleh. Just a tough look for the Jets, but certainly this looks like the Bills division. What you think of the AFC East right now, Ross?
It definitely is the Bills division. They're the best team in that division right now. Josh Allen, you hit it on the head, MVP candidate. He's got that offense humming right now. And it's starting to get to the time of the year where Josh Allen really shines to me, is like when the winter starts to creep in, it starts to get really cold outside. That guy is a battering ram. He doesn't mind the contact, doesn't mind running around. He still has the velocity and the arm strength to get it to his receivers downfield. They obviously traded for Amari Cooper, which helps. The Dolphins really needed that game last week, in my opinion, against the Cardinals, and they blew one. They had a lead for most of that game. They should have been able to close that out. Their defense is a little bit of a mess right now. And then, the Jets are just a disaster. I mean, this is what happens when you turn over your entire keys of your franchise to, a narcissist idiot. It just corrupts everything. It corrupts your entire team, and they're a mess right now. Devontae Adams gets traded there. He basically gets shut out last week almost by Gonzalez, their young corner. Their defense is a mess. They try and blame it on their head coach. He's now sitting at home collecting a fat paycheck to not do anything and show you it wasn't his fault. So, and then the Patriots, obviously, are a young team. They've got the Drake May situation, but he got hurt last week, a concussion, which they have even worse offensive line than the Bears, which is why he was running for his life last week. But that's definitely the division is the Bills. They ran away with that a long time ago.
Absolutely. Robert Saleh, like a lot of New York sports legends, getting paid to go away, making great money to not be a part of that bad team at this point. In the AFC North, the Steelers are at the top, 6-2, and after riding it out with Justin Fields and while Russell Wilson got healthy, they're again the class of that division outside of the Ravens. We'll talk about them in a second, but the quarterback doesn't seem to matter as much when you have such a good defense and special teams, as was indicative of that last win against the Giants, where they're mistake free at quarterback. That's great. They can just lean on that defense. If Najee Harris can be healthy and run the football well, then Mike Tomlin's still an elite coach. They haven't played any great teams yet, really, but the second half they're loaded with division opponents, a lot like the Bears and the NFC North. So we'll see how they handle the Commanders on November 10th after their bye. But the rest of that division, the Ravens, I talked about Lamar Jackson being in that MVP conversation for obvious reasons, and Derrick Henry was a great signing for them. The recent trade getting Deontay Johnson from Carolina for a 5th round pick, it just seemed like a no-brainer to get more talent around Lamar Jackson and get some help for Zay Flowers and company. The Bengals have been in a rough spot, and Joe Burrow thinks that they could still make the playoffs at this point. They can when they're playing their best, and Joe Burrow throwing for over 300 yards, but they've dealt with injuries to T. Higgins, injuries to their defense. They're sitting at 3-5, and it looks like the Ravens, if the standings played out like they did now, they would get at least a wild card, so they'd be the odd man out. And the Browns, we talked about, it's nice to see the story. You don't want it to happen kind of the way it did, but we knew that Deshaun Watson certainly wasn't it at quarterback for this team. And after he tore his Achilles, now Jameis Winston getting that nod is cool, because I'll always root for Jameis Winston. He's just not only entertaining, but just a great guy to have in your huddle. And if you got talent around him, they get Nick Chubb back at a good time when he's going to be healthy. So that should be entertaining. So there's a little positivity for the Browns fan, but certainly it's going to be really down to the wire and depend on these divisional games for Pittsburgh and Baltimore to see who comes out on top in this division.
100%. I think it's the most chaotic division in the NFL right now, because I think all 4 teams are pretty close to evenly matched against each other. Obviously you start at the bottom, the Browns, Deshaun Watson was really holding them back. He was just a disaster the whole time. And I know you don't want to ever root for somebody to get hurt, but, the Browns fans, they have to be happy that he's not going to be their starting quarterback on Sundays for a long time. The Bengals, on offense, Joe Burrow is actually having a very good season. It's their defense is letting them down. Their defense has given up 203 points on the season so far. They've got a point differential for that team at -8 right now. He's going to have to score 30 points a game, 40 points a game just to overcome that bad defense that they have. And then you talk about the Ravens. The Ravens, Lamar Jackson, another MVP candidate, and their offense is fun, and Derrick Henry looks awesome. But again, their defense is just an issue. Their defense gives up so many points, and we saw what happened last week with Jameis Winston was able to get multiple touchdowns on them. And then the Steelers, what can you say about Mike Tomlin? Just a well-coached team. Everybody gave him crap about the Justin Fields situation. He was 100% right. If Russell Wilson is healthy, Russell Wilson gives them the best chance to win going forward as the quarterback. It's just night and day. Then you start getting guys like TJ Watt going on defense, Mika Fitzpatrick. They're going to be a very, very tough team to beat, not only in that division, but in the playoffs as well. Because if somebody has to go to Pittsburgh to try to win a football game with that crowd and that defense, good luck.
Yeah, TJ Watt's still a game wrecker. A big part of that defense being as great as they are. On the AFC South, the Texans are 6-2. They're very good at home. They beat a good Bills team and then lost badly to Vikings earlier this season. So they're figuring things out. Considering the injuries that they've had, it's a huge win to be 6-2 at this point. No Nico Collins, now Stephon Diggs out for the year. They really rode out the storm with Joe Mixon when he was really struggling with his injury. Now he's back. It's still going to be tough to fill in that void for CJ Stroud to work with at receiver. Even if Nico Collins comes back later in the season, Tank Dell can only do so much. The defense, not as great as I thought they'd be, but they're a clear front runner in that division again with the Colts at 4-4. The Colts, and that leads us to talking about Anthony Richardson and how crazy it was to see him basically bench himself this past Sunday. Jacksonville's terrible with Trevor Lawrence and company. Titans are 1-6. one of the worst teams in the division. And then Will Levis getting hurt. We knew how bad they were, but that just even as good a story as Houston is. Have you ever seen anything like that? Nobody had ever seen anything like that, where you see Anthony Richardson take himself out of the game. And honestly, I think they're better off the way he's been playing, because Joe Flacco, you saw what he did for the Browns last year. Look at this vet experience for Flack Daddy, man, and give him the nod. And they're not completely out of that division. They play well at home. They obviously have Jonathan Taylor back, who's going to be healthy. They got a pretty well coached team. So, I'm all for it. All for obviously benching Anthony Richardson after that absurd taking himself out of the game because he was tired.
Yeah, and he's one of the most erratic throwers in the NFL right now. The guy is all over the place. His completion percentage during these games, he's at like 25 to 25, percent, 30% in these games. Keep an eye on the Colts, though. They're 4-4 right now. They're 3-1 at home. But again, best defense in that division. That defense has only given up 172 points on the season. That's with Anthony Richardson's turnovers and mistakes and all that other stuff. They've only scored 175 points. If they can get it rolling on offense, and they can with Joe Flacco, because he is a more consistent quarterback, he's a veteran in the room, I actually think that they can contend with the Texans for that division. The Texans, I'm not sure how they're going to be able to score points without those receivers that you talked about. If you don't have Nico Collins, if you don't have Stephon Diggs, it's going to be tough for CJ Stroud to consistently push the football down the field. And their offensive line's a mess too. So I think it's going to be tough for the Texans to try and score points. Versus what the Colts are going to be able to do. I kind of like the Colts as a dark horse there to take control of that division late in the year.
Colts got to go into Minnesota this Sunday night, so that will be tough for them. And of course, the AFC West, Chiefs, champs stay the champs. They're undefeated still. Now they got DeAndre Hopkins in that recent trade to work with get some relief for Patrick Mahomes after Rashee Rice went out a couple weeks ago. For obvious reasons, they are just so well coached to be undefeated at this point. You don't want to peak in the regular season, but they are just playing a high level of football, even when Pat Mahomes is playing sort of below his level, on like a fantasy standpoint. People are like, drop Pat Mahomes. He's not playing well because he's not as much a rushing threat. But in close games, and you'll see, we talked about the second half where they got to play the Bills. They got to play some other tough teams. But against the opponents they played thus far, they look very much like they could potentially go for that three-peat, and why not at this point when they'd be running the AFC. Broncos are certainly making headlines in that division because of their defense, and Bo Nix, the way that he's been playing is pretty cool to see. Chargers just really kind of all over the place, like decent running game. Justin Herbert, again, kind of erratic when you thought he was going to be the savior for the Chargers. And then the Raiders have just, completely fallen off, heading this second half of the season. They are just really at a miss. They got rid of Devontae Adams, which is sort of, good news for them. But obviously the Chiefs are just, probably the biggest storyline of the NFL and best team for good reason.
Great defense, great coaching. Obviously, this team reminds me of the New England Patriots era after Randy Moss left Tom Brady, and they just kind of grinded out wins with a running game and timely offense. They didn't have the flashy wide receivers, but they had the great quarterback. He didn't make a ton of mistakes. And their defense really put them in positions to win football games. Those guys are still undefeated right now. And, they're going to be on their way to another 13-win season. And then again, the road throughout the playoffs goes through Arrowhead. So if you're Josh Allen and you want that rematch again against Pat Mahomes, you're going to have to go to his house and try and beat him again for another AFC championship. Or same thing with Lamar Jackson. And we saw what happened last year, how cold it was, and what happened to the Dolphins in that game. They were just completely dismantled. That's what this Chiefs team is built for. They're built for negative 20 degrees at home in January. Good luck trying to beat them in that situation. They're keeping Travis Kelce healthy. I like the DeAndre Hopkins move. Again, they're going to ease him in. They're going to keep him healthy for the playoffs. And it's just going to be very difficult to beat those guys. Those guys could win another one again, which is just absolutely amazing. As for the rest of the division, everybody else in that division, a lot of pretenders. I don't believe in Bo Nix at all. I don't think he's a very good quarterback. I don't think that team is a very good team. Their defense is very good. And the Chargers, typical hardball team. kind of grinding it out. They do play very good defense as well, but they don't score a lot of points. And eventually you are going to have to put some points up on the board. And then the Raiders are just a mess. The Raiders are going to be looking to draft a new quarterback. They're like a Shedeur Sanders kind of football team here in the 2025 NFL draft.
They sure are not looking good at Vegas right now. On to the NFC. The Commanders are at the top after that win. Oh, Jesus. Your washer dryer broke, Ross. The Commanders at the top at 6-2 after that win against the Bears. They're undefeated at home. Jaden Daniels, obviously the rookie of the year, and outplaying Caleb Williams. It pains us to say it at this point, but he's been having a great year with Terry McLaurin. They run the ball well. They played great defense considering the departures they had on the defensive line. And then the Eagles, it was kind of a rough start, but they're 5-2. Tush Push alive and well. Jalen Hurts going to be running a lot more than passing, which is sort of bad news for Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. But they are one of the better teams in the NFC, as evident by their record and the way they play on offense and defense, and certainly with a coach on the hot seat, you thought it would not play in their favor. But Dallas at 3-4, disappointing considering all the money spent on Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and the way Jerry Jones has managed this team. And then we could see it with the Giants, Daniel Jones on his way out, but Malik Neighbors, one of those offensive rookie of the year candidates as well. But they're just, obviously the odd man out at a 2-6 record. They're in the same boat as, say, the Raiders, where they really got to figure out what they're going to do at quarterback going forward to try to get out of the bottom of that division.
Yeah, the Giants are a mess. They're going to be looking for a quarterback news soon here. The Cowboys are hanging in there. They have to stay healthy. There are a lot of division games left. They still have to play the Eagles. They have to play the Commanders twice. So they need to get healthy on defense. They need to get Lawrence back on defense. They need to get Micah Parsons back on defense. And they're still hanging in there. I'm not going to write them off yet. They are giving up a lot of points on defense right now. The offense is not as impressive as it was last year, but they're not really running the football that well. They might make a trade as well closer here to the deadline, I think, for a running back. Maybe a guy like Travis Etienne or something like that would be a nice fit for them. I think the Eagles are going to be the team that is eventually going to get it together in that division and overtake Washington. I'm still not sold on this Washington team. I'm just not sold on Jaden Daniels, A, staying healthy long-term for a full season, and then B, being able to continue to put the offense on his shoulders like he has and be able to beat some of these quality teams. So I'm really, really interested to see how he does in these division games. But for me right now, if the Eagles can get it together and if Nick Sirianni can get his head out of his ass as head coach, they are still the most talented team in that division. I trust Jalen Hurts throwing it to A.J. Brown with Saquon Barkley, with Devontae Smith. I like their defense. I think that those guys will still overtake that division when it's all said and done.
Yeah, how about it? On to the NFC North, the Lions at the top. What can you say about them? Certainly not losing a step from last year when they went to the NFC Championship against the 49ers. Jared Goff has been great. Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's a down year for Sam Laporta, but the running game is so good with the 1-2 punch of Gibbs and Montgomery, and the defense, even losing Aiden Hutchinson, they haven't lost a step. They're playing really well. It's this black and blue division that's going to be fun to watch in the second half when these matchups start to happen. When Green Bay, Jordan Love really avoided, as people will tell you, a serious injury with that groin. He said he's open to the possibility of playing Sunday against the Lions. He thinks it's realistic, even though he might miss this entire week of practice. It would not be very good for the Packers. Wouldn't maybe put them in the best position to win. Maybe Malik Willis is the better idea if you're Matt LaFleur and company. And then the Vikings 5-2, beat some good teams, lost to some bad teams. They're surprisingly good at this point. The question for me in that division is, are the Vikings pretenders? We know, obviously, at the Bears, what we've talked about ad nauseum in the first half of the show, but with the Vikings, can they possibly, vie for a wild card or the top seed still?
Comes down to the quarterback, right? It comes down to if you believe that Sam Darnold is a guy that continue to get this going. I do think that they're a good football team. I think the Lions are the best team in the NFC right now, just the entire NFC. They're the most complete team in the NFC right now. But I would put the Vikings slightly ahead of Green Bay. I don't trust Jordan Love. I think he throws too many 50-50 YOLO balls, and I do think that their defense can get got. Also, Jordan Love has been banged up throughout the year. We'll see how that, it's still, he's only halfway through the season. And he's had multiple injuries to his lower body. So we'll see how that goes. I just like the Vikings. I like their coaching staff. I like their offense. Obviously, Justin Jefferson's out there. They have to get Jordan Addison going. He had a cryptic Instagram post this week that all wide receivers do when they don't like it, we're not getting the football. But I also think Brian Flores is the best, is one of the best defensive coordinators in the league right now. And that guy is going to really turn up the heat on a lot of teams, especially a guy like Jordan Love, when it comes time for those two teams to play each other. So to me, it goes Lions, Vikings, Packers, and for now the Bears. But again, I talked about at the beginning of the show, I think any team in that division can get got on any given Sunday. Even the Lions, the Lions are they can get got too. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to really come down to who can also stay healthy long term.
You got to throw out those records in those divisional matchups. That's what I've always said. And as you said, anybody can get got. NFC South, the Falcons are at the top at 5-3. And Kirk Cousins, man, he balled out the last game. And this offense certainly looks as good as advertised, finally, with Bijan Robinson just being a beast, and Drake London, Kyle Pitts putting up numbers finally. Tampa Bay has just been a really tough slog with injuries, but Baker Mayfield, we talked about MVP candidates, and certainly Baker Mayfield has been playing at a really high level. It's great to see. They may be 4-4, but they're certainly not out of battling for that division, but the season-ending injury to Chris Godwin's tough, and then Mike Evans missing significant time. You got to really hope that they can weather the storm while they wait for Mike Evans to come back, and Baker can get them some wins. But the Saints and the Panthers are at the bottom of the division. Panthers starting Bryce Young, they just don't know what they're doing. They're just such a terribly run organization, and now New Orleans at 2-6. Just they're in the same situation. You don't know what their direction is for either of these two teams in that division.
Saints have lost 6 in a row after looking like the greatest offense on turf for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Panthers are
40 in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yep. Panthers are clearly the worst team in football, and it's only going to get worse. I feel bad for a guy like Bryce Young, because as bad as he's been, the infrastructure around him is just absolutely terrible. It sucks. I like that Tampa Bay team a lot, but it sucks that they lost both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Mike Evans should come back in a few weeks, but Godwin was going to be gone for the season. You can't lose two. One guy's going to the Hall of Fame. The other guy's a perennial Pro Bowl talented, wide receiver. It's just tough to keep up with that situation. And the Falcons are turning into one of the most fun teams to watch this season. Because when their offense gets going and when Kirk Cousins gets going, all of a sudden you can unleash Kyle Pitts finally after like year 5 in the NFL. And then Bijan Robinson looks good, and Drake London looks good, and former Bear Darnell Mooney looks good as well. The defense, they're not getting much of a pass rush. So they do rely on Kirk Cousins and that offense to throw a lot. But they are a fun team to watch because, when Kirk gets going, there's a lot of weapons on there that can really get the football and run with it. That's definitely the Falcons' division to run away with in the next couple weeks here.
Yeah, no question. They look like they made the right moves in the offseason for sure. Finally, the NFC West, which is just a toss-up if you look on the paper right now. We talked about the Cardinals. The Niners have been waiting out Christian McCaffrey's return. They lost Brandon Ayuk for the season. Debo, was battling pneumonia a couple weeks ago. They've had offensive line issues and struggles. The Seahawks, you don't know which Seahawks team you're going to get. Obviously, missing DK Metcalf for some time is tough, but he'll be back soon. Geno Smith, it's just really a lot relies on him playing well for them to make any noise in this division and in the NFC as a whole. And then the Rams, again, waiting out Cooper Kupp and Puka Nakua's return. We'll see what Stafford can do. People are high on them, and with all these teams at about 500, it's really anyone's division. I think you would probably point to 49ers just based on experience and if they can get Christian McCaffrey back. But don't even sleep on the Rams at this point, right?
Definitely don't sleep on the Rams. I was just about to say that. They looked awesome last week against the Vikings. You get Sean McVay with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and that offense is going to roll. Matthew Stafford, Kieran Williams is probably the best running back in the league right now, not named Derrick Henry. He's awesome. They've got an outstanding rookie in Jared Verse, who, speaking of the Falcons, that's the guy they should have drafted instead of Michael Penix, because if they had Jared Verse on that defense right now, they would be awesome. But yeah, definitely don't sleep on them. I want to see the 49ers get healthy if they can. Obviously, Brandon Ayuk is out for the season, but it sounds like, fingers crossed, they can get Christian McCaffrey back here in after the bye week, which would be helpful to them as well as my fantasy football team. Please come back, Christian McCaffrey. And then if he does, I still think that they're the best team in that division. But I like the Rams a lot. I think they're a fun football team. And I just love watching McVay scheme up routes for Kupp and Nakua.
For sure. Let's wrap it up with a few quick hits. The World Series, I think, is pretty much in the books. I don't think
Babyface is singing the national anthem right now on my TV.
Babyface? Oh, never mind. Yankees turning it around. Dodgers, they look to end it tonight after allowing the Yankees to steal one. That Fat Joe appearance was wild. But the Dodgers, well deserved. I think that Freddie Freeman playing out of his mind in this series. It just, again, this matchup just doesn't really do much for me. I get it. They're two very storied franchises, but would have rather seen a Detroit or some of these smaller market teams, but good for I'm already saying Dodgers getting another pennant, and Shohei Ohtani getting his first. Yeah.
And that's what it is. This is very much a capitalistic World Series. Both payrolls are well over $300 million, and that's not even counting the deferred payments to Shohei Ohtani. That's also not counting what Juan Soto is going to get in the offseason. He's going to be a $500 million player. But I think it's cool to see the classic logos in the World Series against each other. I think it's good to see the contrast of the two coasts. I think Dodgers fans are awesome. I think Yankees fans are pieces of shit, as it was on full display as what happened last night. Right. But I do think that this goes at least one more game. I predict the Yankees will win tonight and then push this back to LA. And I think those guys in LA, you got three Hall of Famers and 3 MVPs in a row. Mookie Betts, Ohtani, Freddie Freeman. That lineup's going to get going against ex-White Sox Carlos Rodon, and they're going to put this away over the weekend. And the Dodgers will be hoisting another World Series, which is good for them because the last time they won was the COVID World Series. Nobody even acknowledges that really anymore. So it'd be cool for them to win that World Series.
A lot of talent with both teams. I will certainly say that. Not a ton of disrespect to the Yankees.
It would be cool to see Aaron Judge get one at least in the World Series. You got to hit one, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. He's really fallen off into the bats for the Yankees had until yesterday. Fallen pretty short. Quickly with Tyler, the Creator, have you listened to the album? What do you think of Chromacopia? I love it. I think I agree with what most people are saying. It's kind of just like the best of both worlds with Igor and Flower Boy. And I appreciate that, Tyler said that, quote, it's the first album where everything I said is true. It's so honest. I had to wear a mask on my own face to get some of that shit out, end quote. It's really humble and boastful album at the same time, where you get that feeling off your chest that we can all relate to just growing into your 30s and facing all these next life steps. And Ratata, he raps the biggest out the city after Kenny. That's a fact now. I hear no lies there. I love that line. So many good features throughout that, even though he said no features. It's one of his best projects for sure.
It is.
It's very good.
It is one of his best projects. To me, it's the cornucopia, the culmination of all his projects combined. Because I can hear all the sounds of all his projects behind. My favorite album of his is always Goblin. He puts a little bit of Goblin on there. He talked about a little Flower Boy, a little Igor on there as well. He has really taken that Odd Future camp and just kind of put them into that next stratosphere a little bit. You'd like to see maybe a guy like Frank Ocean, maybe fingers crossed, can drop a project now off the heels of this. But Tyler really hasn't missed a project in a long time. The last couple albums are great. Even the Gangsta Grills mixtape he did with DJ Drama was awesome. And you start to think he's probably the king of I always call him like alternative rap, alternative hip hop. And you have guys, he's in that section over here with Travis Scott and guys like Lil Uzi Vert and some of these guys that are not quite your traditional hip hop, but they give you a little bit of everything. And he's over there, but he has that corner on lock. Nobody is beating him. And he's got to be one of the top 5 top 10 stars in hip hop right now. His tours sell out. His fans go crazy for his music. His music sells great. And it's really cool to see him continue on to the success. When I first heard him, I thought he was just going to be like the weird kind of gothy, sound rapper that was just going to be off to the side. But he has turned into a monster star, and good for him.
He's a great live performer, as we well know too. And I mean, just really a great album. As I said, it's fantastic features. I appreciate just everything, like the production, just all the lyricism. It's really just an incredible project. Well done. Halloween tomorrow, Ross. How do you feel about pumpkin beer?
You know what? That's the thing that I used to like, and I don't like anymore. As I've gotten older, I really shy away from the flavored beers. Even a lot of IPAs. I'm not a big IPA person anymore.
Sure.
This is the time of the year, though. I do like a darker ale. I do still love a Christmas ale. So we're getting past that stuff into this. But yeah, to me, this is more like I still want I've gone more to the high life, away from the Coors Light these days, and more so like a nice high life. And then
a word.
Yeah, and then I'll switch to my bourbon, of course.
That a boy. I like it.
Yeah.
Worst candy of all time.
Worst candy of all time. It's probably the Smarties, which nobody sells anymore. Those little like gross chalky fruit tablets that are in there. I'll tell you what, Bradley won. They have one of those things where they fill up all the gum in there. You have to guess how many are in the jar. And if you guess closest to the number, you win. And he won, but it was just a big old thing of double bubble. And you take one, and you feel like you're just gonna crack every teeth, tooth in your mouth. You're like gnawing on double bubble for like an hour and a half. It's disgusting. That's the worst.
That's trash. And also, I don't like candy corn. I think it's terrible. I don't understand.
Candy corn. I do. I used to enjoy candy corn, but you have to mix it with like some peanuts. So if you mix it together, you kind of get like that
when you
that
can't
Chicago mixed popcorn. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Mounds is also terrible.
Yeah,
I went to Target like at the last minute to get candy, and all that was left is Mounds. Anything with coconut,
bad.
The kids don't want.
Yes, I do need this season to be over for my own mental psyche. I've been consuming way too many horror movies over the last month, and it's getting dark.
It's
Let me tell you what, if you watch one movie with Art the Clown from Terrifier, and all of a sudden you're in a really dark place mentally. So I need to get past this season and into some more happy stuff. Although I need to stop. I'm also 2 episodes behind on The Penguin, which is also kind of dark as well. So it doesn't stop.
After Monster and everything else you've watched too.
Exactly. Menendez bullshit.
Bears prediction as we're in overtime here. What do you got? Yeah. I got the Bears winning a close one on the road. I think they put up 27 against the Cardinals to 25.
I got Bears 31-23.
Look at that. And we don't get very political, but get out and vote. No matter who you vote for, make sure you vote. That's all. And some of the hottest music to drop so far this season.
Joe Biden is asleep. Kamala is at a dance party with Beyonce. Beyonce. Dance party with Beyonce.
That's fire. It's up there with
I too would like to be at a dance party with Beyonce. That sounds great.
It's pretty fire. Thanks everybody for listening in and watching on YouTube. Remember, if you missed any of our previous episodes, they are, of course, on YouTube on the Barroom Network channel. They're on audio-only versions, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts and shows. Like, subscribe, tell a friend or two. Follow at Barroom Network for all our great programming that we got going on here. Of course, tune in every week for me and Ross. Follow me at The Real Evan Mac. Follow Ross at Ross Reed. Everybody have a safe and fun Halloween. But for now, we say deuces. Be good to each other out there. So long, everybody.
Peace.
Thank you.